A federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. Spring, 2025. A man in his 50s is led into a courtroom. He wears the plain clothing of a federal detainee. His hands are restrained. Around him sit federal agents, dozens of them. By the account of reporters present, many of whom have spent the better part of 2 decades chasing the organization he once commanded. He is asked how he pleads. Through the formal machinery of an American court, he answers, "Not guilty." To almost everyone in that room, his name means something specific. It means the most militarized criminal organization in the modern history of Mexico. It means a wave of violence so extreme that it forced a national government to declare days of mourning. It means a reputation for brutality that, even among cartel leaders, was considered exceptional. For years, the United States government had offered $5 million for information leading to his capture. For years, he had been one of the most feared men in the hemisphere, a commander who controlled thousands of armed operators and effective influence over a vast stretch of Mexican territory. And now he sits in a courtroom in the capital of the country he had spent his life sending drugs into, facing charges that, according to reporters at the hearing, could carry the possibility of the death penalty. His name is Miguel Ángel Treviño Morales, but almost no one calls him that. They call him Z-40. This is the story of how a teenage lookout, earning the equivalent of $30 a shift on the streets of a Mexican border town, rose to command the most violent cartel of his era and of the single act of betrayal that may have put him at the very top. But more than that, it is the story of a question that the intelligence services of 2 countries have been trying to answer for more than a decade. The question of whether the man now sitting in that Washington courtroom got there the same way he rose to power in the first place: by betrayal. To understand how he reached that courtroom, we have to go back almost 30 years, to a border town and a teenager with no future anyone could have predicted. Miguel Ángel Treviño Morales was born on the 18th of November, 1970, in Nuevo Laredo, in the Mexican border state of Tamaulipas. It was, and remains, one of the most strategically valuable pieces of ground in the entire drug trade, a city pressed directly against the United States border, a crossing point through which an enormous share of North American commerce, legal and illegal, has always flowed. He was not a soldier. This matters more than almost anything else in his story. He never served in the Mexican army. He never received formal training in weapons, in tactics, in counterinsurgency. His education, in any conventional sense, was minimal. What he had instead was the street. He began, according to multiple intelligence reports cited over the years, at around the age of 20, as what the cartels call a halcón hawk, a lookout. He sat at fixed points around Nuevo Laredo and reported the movements of the police and the army by radio. For this, he earned the equivalent of about $30 per shift. But his superiors noticed something in him quickly: an unusual memory for faces and routes, a head for numbers, and, above all, an absolute willingness to carry out orders without questioning them, no matter what those orders were. In a few short years, he climbed from lookout to enforcer, from enforcer to a boss of a local territory, from there to a trusted operator. And by the middle of the 2000s, he had been folded into the armed wing of the organization. He served a unit whose name was already becoming a synonym for terror across northern Mexico: Los Zetas. To understand what Los Zetas were and why Treviño's place inside them was so unusual, you have to understand how they began. Because Los Zetas were not founded by criminals. They were founded by soldiers. In the late 1990s, a group of elite Mexican Special Forces men trained, in some cases, in an airmobile Special Forces group originally created to fight drug trafficking deserted the army. Recruited by the leader of the Gulf Cartel, Ociel Cardenas Guillen, they became the first truly militarized armed wing in the history of Mexican organized crime. They kept their military radio codes. They numbered themselves internally: Z-1, Z-2, Z-3. And the name they took would soon mean something the whole country learned to fear. The original Zetas were, in a very real sense, an army. They operated with military discipline, military hierarchy, military coordination. Their commander, after the death of the first leader, was a former Special Forces soldier, a man known internally as Z-40, whose given name was Heriberto Lacano Lazcano. For Z-40, Los Zetas were an armed organization with a code, inherited from the army he had left. Operations against rivals, protection of shipments, discipline. It was a cartel built by soldiers, run by soldiers, with the methods of soldiers. And then there was the lookout from Nuevo Laredo. His number, when it was finally assigned, told the whole story of where he stood. Z-40, not Za or Shi, not one of the original founding deserters, the men who had walked away from the army together. 40, a civilian operator, brought in long after the unit was formed. Technically, a subordinate. But formal rank and real power are not the same thing. And within a few short years, the man numbered 40 would be making decisions that the man numbered 3 had never approved. The early years of coexistence between the two were, according to numerous reports, relatively stable. Z-3 handled the strategic direction of the organization, operating mostly from the mountainous regions of Coahuila and Veracruz, keeping close to the original ex-military corps. Z-40, for his part, was given control of the territory he knew best, Tamaulipas. And in Tamaulipas, the lookout began to build something new. Before Z-40, the Mexican cartels financed themselves almost entirely through one thing: the trafficking of drugs. Treviño, according to multiple reports from U.S. drug enforcement, did something that would reshape the entire economics of organized crime in Mexico. He systematized extortion. He turned the demand for protection payments from shopkeepers, from ranchers, from businesses, from migrants, into a second parallel source of income. Pay and you could operate. Refuse and you lost your business. In many cases, much more than your business. It was, from a purely financial perspective, ruthlessly efficient. It was also a complete break from the original logic of the organization. Z-3, according to the same sources, had reservations about the model. Mass extortion drew attention, political attention, military attention. It diluted the image of Los Zetas as a disciplined armed force. It created enemies among ordinary civilians who, until then, had stayed neutral. But the commander's objections never hardened into a direct order to stop. And Z-40, in the absence of any instruction to the contrary, simply kept expanding it. By 2010, the protection payment system had become one of the principal sources of income for Los Zetas across at least 5 northern Mexican states. The cartel of the soldier had mutated into something else, and the mutation only accelerated. In 2010, Los Zetas formally split from the Gulf Cartel, their original parent organization. The break was violent, and it launched a war that would cost thousands of lives across northeastern Mexico. But it also did something internal. Without the Gulf Cartel above them, Los Zetas now had to make every decision themselves. territory, resources, targets, strategy, and the two men at the top, according to intelligence reports, increasingly disagreed about all of it. Z-40, faithful to the original military model, preferred a low profile, confrontation only when strategically necessary, quiet arrangements with local authorities, gradual, consolidated growth. Z-40 preferred the opposite. High-profile operations, confrontation as a demonstration of power, aggressive expansion, even at a cost. And in 2010 and 2011, that divergence expressed itself in a series of events so extreme that they brought the full weight of the Mexican state down on the organization events that, according to later investigations, had not been authorized by the commander himself. The first was in the municipality of San Fernando, Tamaulipas. In August of 2010, the bodies of 72 migrants from Central and South America were found at a ranch in the region. Months later, in the spring of 2011, nearly 200 clandestine graves were discovered in the same area, with a total that climbed past 250. The responsibility, according to the official Mexican investigation, lay with operators under the direct command line of Z-40. The decision, according to testimony that later surfaced in U.S. federal courts, had been made without consulting Z-3 as part of a regional strategy against migrant groups suspected of cooperating with rivals. The commander, according to operators who later cooperated with authorities, learned of it only after it had already happened. The massacre triggered a diplomatic crisis with several Central American nations and concentrated global media attention on Los Zetas. Z-3 expressed his anger. Z-40 did not heed it. The second event came in the spring of 2011 in the town of Allende, Coahuila. Over several days, much of the town was devastated. More than 300 people were reported missing, according to civil organizations that documented the case. The motive, revealed years later in U.S. federal trials, was a personal act of retaliation by Z-40 against two regional operators he suspected of informing for U.S. drug enforcement, a suspicion never confirmed by conclusive evidence. Z-3, according to investigative reporting, learned of the operation while it was already underway. His reaction, according to those same sources, was one of horror not at the use of force, which he had authorized for years against rivals, but at the completely disproportionate scale. The fact that the victims included entire families with no operational connection to anyone, and the unilateral decision to act on that scale without authorization. For several analysts who studied the organization, Allende marked the internal breaking point of Los Zetas. The third event came in August of 2011 in the city of Monterrey, one of the most important economic centers in the country. A casino was set on fire in broad daylight. 52 people lost their lives inside. Security cameras captured operators entering the building beforehand. The apparent trigger had been the refusal of the establishment's owner to pay the monthly protection fee that Z-40 had imposed across the region. The political reaction was immediate. The government of then-President Felipe Calderón declared 3 days of national mourning. And the Army and the Navy launched coordinated operations against Los Zetas cells in at least 4 northern states. For Z-3, the casino in Monterrey was precisely the kind of operation the cartel was supposed to avoid. Maximum attention, minimal strategic benefit, and once again, no consultation with the absolute commander of the organization. But when he was questioned internally, Z-40 defended the decision. Maintaining the protection system, he argued, required public, unmistakable examples. If a single business refused to pay and faced no visible consequence, others would follow, and the entire system would collapse. The logic was operationally coherent. It was also the exact opposite of everything the commander stood for. From the spring of 2011 onward, according to multiple reports, ZD3 began to operate in increasing isolation, smaller internal meetings, communications limited to specific operators, a steady decline in his physical presence in the territories controlled by Z-40. The commander of the most militarized cartel in the modern history of Mexico was withdrawing inward. And as he withdrew, his second-in-command kept expanding his power. By the middle of 2012, according to U.S. intelligence sources, there were effectively two identifiable factions inside Los Zetas. The faction of Z3, made up largely of the original ex-military operators and regional commanders in Veracruz and Coahuila, and the faction of Z-40, made up of the civilian operators incorporated later and the territory bosses of Tamaulipas, Nuevo León, and beyond. The two were not at open war, but they were no longer operating as a single organization. Some operators loyal to Z3 began to disappear under circumstances that were never clarified. Others crossed over to the faction of Z-40 in exchange for promotions and access to more profitable routes. And a smaller group, according to later reports, began to speak openly about the possibility of a change at the very top. That was the situation in the autumn of 2012. And then, on the 7th of October 2012, the commander of Los Zetas went to a baseball game. It was an amateur match in the small municipality of Progreso, Coahuila. Z3 traveled there in a white double-cabin pickup truck. According to the official report later issued by the Mexican Navy, the vehicle carried a significant quantity of weapons, but it carried almost no protection. Against every security protocol he himself had established over years, the convoys, the perimeters, the layered defenses, the most wanted man on the continent traveled that afternoon with only one or two escorts and no support. An anonymous call alerted the Mexican Navy to a group of armed men at the field. When the Marines arrived, the game stopped. There was a brief exchange of fire. When it ended, there were two bodies on the ground. One belonged to an escort. The other, according to the Navy, belonged to Heriberto Lascano, the Z-3. The founder, the commander. His identity was confirmed by fingerprints. But the body itself would never receive a full federal forensic examination. Because that same night, before federal authorities could take official custody, an armed group entered the funeral home in the town of Sabinas, where the body had been taken. They overpowered the owner, and they took the body away. It was never seen again. And in the hours that followed the official death, something just as significant happened. Miguel Ángel Treviño Morales, the lookout, the Z-40, the technical subordinate, assumed absolute command of Los Zetas in less than 24 hours. The transition was remarkably orderly for an organization that had just lost its historic leader. No visible internal disputes, no clashes between factions, no period of uncertainty. For the analysts who studied the case afterward, the speed and smoothness of that transition suggested something specific. It suggested that Treviño had been preparing for that moment for months. And it raised the questions that remain, to this day, the most uncomfortable in the entire internal history of Los Zetas. How did Mexican military intelligence learn, through an anonymous call, the exact location of the absolute commander of the cartel in a small town on a quiet Sunday afternoon? Why did Z-3, against every protocol he had built over years, travel that day with almost no protection? And why did Z-40 later order the theft of the body? What forensic evidence could that body have contained that the new commander did not want federal authorities to examine? The official answers never addressed these questions directly. But consider the human shape of what is being asked. For a decade, two men had shared the leadership of the same army. The soldier and the lookout, the founder and the operator. They had survived a war against their former parent cartel, the splintering of their own organization, the slow drift of the men beneath them into two camps. Whatever trust had once existed between them had been worn down, year by year, decision by decision, until what remained was two commanders who no longer spoke as one. And then, 20 days after a private confrontation between them at a ranch in Coahuila, a meeting that was never officially documented. With no witnesses and no recordings, one of the two was dead, and the other ran the entire organization. In the world of the cartels, that kind of timing is rarely a coincidence. Treviño's reign at the top lasted approximately 9 months. Under his absolute command, Los Zetas held their structure. The drug trafficking continued. The protection payments continued. In some regions, the violence against rivals increased. But the internal cohesion of the cartel, according to multiple analysts, never recovered from the process that had brought him to power. Operators loyal to the old commander who had survived the internal purges began to act with growing autonomy. Some sought protection with rival cartels, and a smaller group, according to later reports, began to cooperate quietly with U.S. authorities. On the 15th of July, 2013, in the pre-dawn darkness, on a dirt road southwest of Nuevo Laredo, Miguel Ángel Treviño Morales was captured by elements of the Mexican Navy. He was traveling with only 2 other people, an escort and an accountant. $2 million in cash, 8 long guns, no convoy, no army of protection. The capture, as would emerge in the months that followed, had been made possible by an internal informant, a person whose identity remains protected to this day, under a U.S. federal witness program. For the analysts who had spent years studying the internal tensions of Los Zetas, the parallel was impossible to ignore. The man who had inherited the cartel through an operation that suggested internal betrayal had himself been captured, just 9 months later, through an operation that also suggested internal betrayal. The cycle, in the most militarized organization in the history of Mexican drug trafficking, had closed on itself. But the story did not end at his capture. It simply moved into a new and slower phase. After Z-40 was taken, his younger brother Oscar Omar Treviño Morales, known as Z-42, assumed control of the organization. He led it until his own capture in a wealthy suburb of Monterrey in early 2015. With both brothers imprisoned in Mexico, Los Zetas, as a unified organization, fractured. But the Treviño brothers, according to U.S. prosecutors, did not stop. From within the Mexican prison system, the 2 men allegedly continued to direct operations. The organization they ran was renamed. It became the Cartel del Noreste, the Northeast Cartel, and it continued, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. The trafficking, the violence, the killings, the kidnappings, and the acts of brutality that had defined its predecessor. In February of 2025, the United States designated that successor organization a foreign terrorist organization. And in that same month, under mounting pressure from Washington, Mexico carried out something extraordinary. It expelled 29 high-level cartel suspects to the United States in a single transfer. Among them were the two brothers who had once run Los Zetas. The man who had risen from a $30 a shift lookout to the absolute command of the most feared cartel of his era was, for the first time, in the custody of the country he had spent his life sending drugs into. In the spring of 2025, the brothers were arraigned in a federal court in Washington on charges of running a continuing criminal enterprise that, according to the Department of Justice, involved multiple murder conspiracies. U.S. authorities described them as personally responsible for and directing dozens of killings. Both pleaded not guilty. And according to reporters present at the hearing, both faced the possibility of the most severe penalty in the American system. As of this telling, the trial of Z-40 is set for the middle of 2026. He has not been convicted of these U.S. charges. Under the American system, he is presumed innocent until that trial reaches its conclusion. But the stakes could not be higher. The man who built an empire on the absolute willingness to carry out any order, the man who systematized terror as a business model, now sits in a cell in the United States, waiting for a jury of the country he targeted to decide his fate. And so we are left, as we so often are with these stories, with a set of questions that may never have clean answers. Who, inside Los Zetas, gave Mexican military intelligence the location of the commander Z-40 on that October afternoon in 2012? Who gave them the location of Z-40 himself, 9 months later, on that dirt road outside Nuevo Laredo? Was there any connection between the two operations? What forensic secret left with the body that was stolen from the funeral home and never seen again? And what exactly will the witnesses cooperating with the United States government reveal when the trial finally begins? Some of these answers may emerge in a Washington courtroom in the months ahead. Others, as so often happens in the history of organized crime in Mexico, may never come at all. What is certain is this: Miguel Ángel Treviño Morales was never the obvious heir to anything. He was not one of the soldiers who founded Los Zetas. He had no army training, no formal education, no place in the original hierarchy. He was a lookout, numbered 40, brought in long after the unit was formed a subordinate in every official sense. And he rose above all of them, above the soldiers who had trained to fight him, above the commander he was supposed to answer to. He did it through an unshakable willingness to do what others would not, and, very possibly, through a betrayal of the one man who stood above him. But in the world he built, betrayal is not a tool you use once and put away. It is the medium itself, the water everyone swims in. And the man who may have reached the top by handing over his own commander reached the bottom the very same way, handed over in turn by someone closer to him than he ever suspected. In the cartels, betrayal rarely walks alone. It almost always walks in company. And almost always, somewhere down the road, it comes back. If this story showed you the hidden complexity behind the headlines, subscribe to Sleeping Crimes. Every week, we unravel the stories we need to understand, not to glorify crime, but to understand its real impact. Turn on notifications. We'll see you at the next crime.